Hello and welcome to Generation Logistics Season 3. I'm your host Ed, and this season we are going to be myth busting. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the myth that warehousing is a dead-end job. Now, I'm joined by the wonderful Olivia, Luca, and Sarah. Thank you guys for joining me today. It's great to have you with us. Can we just start by, can you introduce yourselves? Let me know what your day-to-day job involves. Can I start down this end?
Of course. So, hello, I'm Olivia. I work for Asda Distribution. I'm currently on the You Can Be programme, which is one of the development programmes that Asda do offer. And then in my day-to-day role, I'm currently what Asda call a step-up. So it's sort of that gap between, I'm not quite management, I'm working there, I'm developing my leadership skills. So when a manager can't be running an area, I will run the pick floors of up to 30 colleagues, and I run the replenishment process. So when stuff comes into the warehouse, before it's put into the slot, I manage those colleagues so that it gets to the slot on the time before it's sent out to stores.
Wow, there's so much that we need to unpick there. I can't wait to get into detail on that. Thank you ever so much for joining us. And Luca.
Hi, my name's Luca. I work at GXO Logistics in Rushden. I'm a degree apprentice, so it's a level 6 in supply chain leadership and management at Sheffield Hallam. I'm also a first-line manager there as well, which was something fairly recent, so I'm doing both at the same time.
Fabulous.
Quite exciting, something different for me. But
That's brilliant. I can't wait to unpick that. And Sarah.
My name's Sarah Mordage. I am the talent acquisition partner for the UK and Ireland here at Maersk, and I have been doing an internal recruitment job for about 24 years now, mostly within internal recruitment, but more recently, over the last 6 years, potentially recruiting within warehousing logistics environments. So
Brilliant.
I recruit roles that can be a warehouse colleague right up through to senior management roles in the UK and Ireland.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, all three of you, for joining us and bringing so much experience to the sofa here today. Can I just start by asking, what's the most common misconception about working in a warehouse? Sarah, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I would say that people think it's a dirty environment. I think people don't understand how clean the environment is, how well organised the environment is, and also how it is quite technical. There is a technical element to it. It isn't just about walking into the role and not having any development or qualifications. It is quite a technical job, and it's quite a difficult, there's lots of things people need to learn. So it's not just a kind of job where you can just walk into and start work.
I love that. And actually, that element of it's a clean job, for a lot of our listeners out there, that's going to be really important to know that as well. I'm really interested in the technicalities. Could you talk me through a little bit more on that? What technicalities are involved?
So depending on what warehouse it is, there's an automation. There could be automation throughout that warehousing. So it means that they would need to have an understanding of how that the automation works. Also around our forklift trucks, things like that, safety management, our health and safety, obviously safety is paramount, and how that now interacts and works with our customers and also within our products to ensure that the products are stacked the right way. So there's lots of technicalities in what is a day-to-day warehouse colleague role.
Fabulous. Thank you ever so much. And Olivia, can I ask you the same question?
Absolutely. I mean, I've only been in Asda Distribution for coming up to a year, so I'm very new to it. And I think before I started, I was certain that it was just a dead-end job, what we're myth debusting. But it's absolutely not. There's so many avenues that you can go down into. There's so much training provided. Anything that you can think of, you can develop your skills. And like what Sarah said, people think it's a dirty environment. There's so much health and safety protocol that it's absolutely not. It's a nice environment to be in.
That's brilliant. And that's actually a really great thing to start with, is that actually this isn't we're busting a myth straight away that warehousing is a dirty job, which I really love there. Fantastic. Now, I'm sure a lot of people at home can relate to the stereotype of bored people stood at a conveyor belt and imagining that's what a warehouse job is like. Now, I'm sure that's not what it is, but could you give me an insight as to what the day-to-day looks like in a typical warehouse? Luca, let's start with you.
So day normally starts with a briefing where managers and colleagues get together, share any notices that need to be shared. But it's also an opportunity for colleagues to raise any points, so they aren't just going straight to work. There is that touch point, and then throughout the day there are further touch points after breaks, etc. The environment is a nice one. I can speak for our site especially, that it's bright, it's new, it's clean. There's a clean as you go process. You've got the music. There is points to get involved with other things, not necessarily like away from the job. So if we've got any engagement activities going on, we typically have them once a month. But aside from that, there's a lot of time within the day to touch in. Ultimately, it's your job at the end of the day. If you want to have influence, we'll let you have that, because we know what sort of you do best on the shop floor.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds really that there's quite a lot of scope within the role. Olivia, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, absolutely. So at my site, when you are picking, you are wearing a Bluetooth headset, which at first thought you might think, I'm not going to speak to anyone. My day is going to be 8 hours of silence speaking numbers into a headset. But it's not the case. You're working with 25 people on the floor.
Wow.
They're all doing the same job. So you can stop, you can have a chat. If you're working with part of the automation, which is where if you've got dexterity issues, that you can be part of a team. You're surrounded by other people, like-minded people. You can stop, you can have a chat. You make friends in the warehouse. It's you can always stop and have a chat.
It sounds like a really nice community as much as anything else, and we've seen a lot about the growth that you can get within a warehouse. Sarah, do you have any insight from your perspective? I know you're in recruitment, but in terms of what the day-to-day looks like in a warehouse?
I think it's informative. I think people come in and they're met, and they're part of that huddle, the set off sort of meeting, and then off they go into taking up their roles, whether that could be on forklift trucks, whether that could be picking and packing, whether that could be doing some site administration work to support the management team. I've always found it quite a fun environment. There's loads of engagement activities that go on in warehousing, because it's about keeping the spirit of the guys picking and packing and the 8-hour day uplifting. So there's often engagement activities that are going on, things that we've got maybe sort of activities that they can perhaps get involved in on their breaks, things like that. So it is, for me, I've always found it quite a fun environment. There's lots of banter. The radio's generally on, and people are quite high-spirited.
Yeah, so it's definitely not like the stereotype that many
Not at
people
all.
would imagine. Olivia, you mentioned that you've come from a different route. How did you find your experience coming straight out of that schooling environment, going into a warehouse job that you're in now?
Coming out of secondary school recently, teachers promote university,
Yeah.
and you almost feel pushed out if you don't want to go down the traditional university route. I think they say that because teachers are in that position they're in now because they have gone to university.
Yeah.
So maybe they don't feel as experienced to share ideas on apprenticeship routes going into full-time work. But I think it's important to consider that there are other routes than university, and you're not going to be labelled as a failure or
Yeah.
not as well educated, or things like that for not going to university. I think if you don't go to university and you go into an apprenticeship or full-time work, you're gaining the industry knowledge.
Can I ask, what kind of opportunities are there for growth and development that exist for individuals if they want to start out in a warehousing role? Luca, you're in an interesting position. Can you discuss this point?
There's a lot. You've got lots of different departments and supportive functions on site. So you've got inventory, HR, planning. There's a lot. So for me, when I first went into warehousing, I didn't really realise how many functions there are that you could go into. So one that's quite new for us is the ESG team on our site, which I didn't realise how much the company valued that and how much work you can put into that, and like the jobs you can have within that sort of field. So there is a lot more than I ever realised.
Yeah.
And it's not just purely the operation on the shop floor, it's behind the scenes. There is a lot.
It's amazing to know there's so many roles. And just from my understanding, what does ESG stand for?
Environmental social governance.
Right. Oh, wow. So literally you've got every function within that warehouse capacity there, from HR all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. And Sarah, you obviously recruit for all of these areas. What would you say in relation to this question?
I have to say, having worked across many different industries, I think within warehousing is where we see the most internal growth. where we see people who have come in and started maybe on the degree apprenticeship or as an apprenticeship or as a graduate, and seen that development go up through into a more senior management position. And probably I would say within warehousing that's more prevalent than most, because there's a lot more in terms of steps that can be made into sort of first line management. As you said, there's so many different opportunities within warehousing, inventory, the HR teams, the safety team alone is in one warehouse can be multiple heads. And I think certainly within the industry, I would say this is the industry that you see most that people develop through those areas and into sort of more senior roles.
That's fabulous. And Olivia, you're sort of in that position at the moment, aren't you? Could you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Asda, as a warehouse, everyone starts as a picker. So you come in, you're fully trained in it. You spend about 2 weeks getting trained in the automation, in the MHE, which is the forklifts, how to stack, all the basics. Then a few months down the line, you train in a second skill. So that's in a process such as goods in, everything that comes into the warehouse, to check it, to make sure that it's right, to replenishing the stock once a pick slot's empty, to sending it out to stores. I'm on the Step Up programme, and which is where I'm developing my leadership skills. So there's so much room, and all the managers are so helpful in developing skills. There's apprenticeships that you can go on to, so ranging from level 2, 3, all the way up to level 6 or 7, such as HR. There's so much. You can't even imagine the room for development that is in a warehouse.
That's fantastic. I love that. And if you are interested in apprenticeships or getting started in a warehouse career, make sure to check out generationlogistics.org. Can you guys share any stories or examples of employees who have advanced from an entry-level position into leadership roles? Luca, do you have any examples of these?
Most of our senior leadership team on site does come from being in a role where they were like an operative, or sort of it wasn't on a growth program. So I speak to any of them and they'll say, I've been in the same position where I was an operative, I was picking, packing, etc. So there's a lot of people. I can't actually pick one. Our general manager, he's one. He shared his story with me where he started off as agency, going to operative, developing for the first line manager, shift manager, then working his way up to the site manager. So there is a lot. I can't really pick one,
that's
to be honest.
brilliant. It must be quite inspiring to see people who have moved their way up as well.
Yeah, it does give some inspiration, gives you a lot of confidence that you trust sort of where you are, and that you can grow, and that there is the potential to grow. So yeah, for sure there is.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. And Sarah, can I pick your brains on this?
I do agree. I think there are, again, multiple people that I can think of that, not one specific person. I can probably talk around sort of post our graduate scheme. So certainly in Maersk, and I'm sure my HR director won't mind me saying, but he started as a graduate and is now obviously in a very senior role in HR. And also we have an individual who actually started before the grad scheme, so more of an entry level, but now has recently been appointed a director. So there's lots of different there's lots of stories that I can think of, but probably one individual that really stands out, not really, but it is very prevalent, I think.
That's so exciting to hear as well, and it's really inspiring. I know for me as an outsider to this, but also for our viewers, that you can see people come in at entry-level positions or graduate positions or apprenticeships and actually make it to that HR director or director level. So it is all possible, all on the table, up for grabs, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. So what kind of training and development programs are typically available to an average warehouse worker, and how can that help them grow in their careers? Olivia, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so in terms of development programs, there's specifically the one that I'm on, the You Can Be program. So you're assigned a project within the warehouse, so something to improve. Mine was focused on the replenishment process. So how can we make it more efficient? How can it benefit the business? How can it benefit the colleagues? So you spend a few months working on that with fellow colleagues. You go through online courses to develop your leadership skills, your management skills. You understand a lot more about the business and how it works. There's also apprenticeships, lots of different levels of them. And Yeah.
Fabulous. No, that's brilliant. It's great to see that's all available there. And thank you for sharing what you're involved with. Luca, within your experience, what sort of development and training programs do you come across?
So with my apprenticeship in particular, I know with other people in my class on the cohort, they get to go into different sort of roles on like rotation. So you might go into finance, you might go into operations. You're not set in doing one particular job. So especially with this apprenticeship, there's a lot of opportunity. You might find quite like continuous improvement, something like that, and you can then work a bit more within that area. So the apprenticeships that I know and have heard of are designed to get you involved in everything. So it's never a case of you're stuck in one area. You get to learn a lot, apply yourself, just a lot of opportunity to learn the whole business in the process.
It's brilliant. And I suppose having that rounded understanding of the logistics sector is going to support you in your growth. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this?
I think certainly within our sort of, my experience is, the apprenticeship programs are fantastic in developing people from that kind of that operative colleague kind of population. So developing them into our next sort of stars, our next inventory, But this year we've seen the relaunch of our UK and apprenticeship and graduate scheme. So actually we've kind of done a refresh on that to actually look at the opportunities that we can now get the more involved in as logistics and supply chain evolves. But in terms of sort of day to day, they have development journeys. They'll work with our training team. We have a great online training facility as well. So there's lots of opportunity, and if they want to take those opportunities, there's certainly no stopping them getting involved in projects, across the business really.
I love that. And you've mentioned a little bit there about the opportunities and growing and how exciting this area is going to be. So thinking about the warehouse itself, what are some of the most exciting and innovative technologies or perhaps processes that are being introduced into warehouses today? And how can these create new opportunities for employees? I'll open that one up to the floor. Who wants to go first?
I suppose really in terms of from my understanding, is more the automation and how the automation can support the warehousing. It's never going to do the job of our individuals and our colleagues, and I think it's important that we realise that is never going to happen. There's got to be those touch points for a safety aspect alone. But I think certainly the automation side of the business and how that works and can sort of the robotics is certainly quite an interesting area, I would say.
Definitely. And that's really interesting to hear about the innovations and robotics coming into warehousing. Of course, if you want to hear more about AI and the myth that AI is stealing logistics jobs, make sure to check out our other episode here at generationlogistics.org. I'd like to ask you all now, can warehouse jobs serve as a springboard into other areas of logistics or supply chain? What are your thoughts on that? Luca, let's jump to you.
Yes, definitely. Like I said, for apprenticeships, not even just apprenticeships, you can apply yourself into other roles. So on our site, we have like CI ambassadors, something, let's say, unofficial sort of job where you can just spend a couple hours your day, your week, getting involved, that sort of thing. So yes, it can help you to get into other areas, even if, like I said, it's not an official job or program. You can just get some development, expand your knowledge in these different areas, and then if you want to progress further, you might find a job outside logistics or within logistics jobs that involve different areas.
So you're going to get that exposure across other areas whilst currently doing your role at the moment. That's brilliant. Olivia, can I ask you the same thing?
Absolutely. So I think networking plays a massive one in that, especially in a warehouse role, you're exposed to all sorts of people, colleagues, more senior members of the team. So when I first started, I had weekly reviews with my line manager who can recommend you. I mean, a lot of warehouse jobs actually recruit from within. So they'll take someone that's entry level and they'll develop them, use their skills that they've already learnt, and actually recommend them for jobs that are probably a higher position than them, which is all trainings provided. It's fabulous. It's definitely, if you start in a warehouse role but you're interested in something in logistics, there's nothing to say that you can't develop your skills and go into that job later on.
I love that. And you mentioned a little bit about internal recruitment there. So I'm going to turn to Sarah, who's internal recruiter. Can you give us some examples
Yeah.
of how this can serve as a springboard?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we do see, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is that in warehousing, it is so prevalent that we see a lot of development within the business. So essentially we have intern colleagues coming in for whatever, it might be that they're doing a part-time role while they're in uni, or they may be maybe that they're coming in to start their career in warehousing. We will always look within, because to understand a warehouse, it comes from that, being on that floor. And I think, as you referenced, part of your role is you went straight in as a picker and a packer to understand that whole process. So actually, to bring somebody in who probably hasn't had that warehouse exposure and put them into a role within contract logistics and supply chain really means that we have to take that development to one step back to move 2 steps forward. Whereas actually somebody internally who's already got that warehouse knowledge and understands the movement of goods, I think we certainly do a lot of our recruitment is internally. We move people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you can actually, there's almost a clear career path there for people who are wanting to come into it.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that. Brilliant. Thank you. Now, you mentioned a little bit about networking and the key role that plays. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the role of networking from a warehouse perspective? Are there opportunities for mentorship, building professional connections? What does this environment look like?
So networking plays a massive role within a warehouse. Talking to your fellow colleagues, some of them have been there years. For me, I've only been in a warehouse for coming up to a year. So getting the advice and insight from other colleagues is crucial. Also talking to your senior members of the team, so talking to managers, talking to shift managers about their experience within a warehouse, and also who they know. They can put you in touch with people that can develop your skills and things like that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, of course, asking people who they've got contacts with. The more I do the series, the more I realise that everyone wants to see everyone else succeed, which is brilliant. Luca, can I ask whether you've got experience with this networking?
Yes, definitely. So there's a lot of opportunity to potentially go to other sites. They'll put your name forward for things like this, interviews. You get to meet a lot of people, and across the supply chain, there are so many people involved. So there will always be communication, contact with different people that you don't necessarily expect to be in communication with. So all the time, really, there's opportunity to reach out to new people, make connections, learn a bit more.
Yeah,
so, yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. And can I ask, off the back of that, what would you say to somebody who is trying to network at the moment? What would you suggest to them to go out and do? Maybe they want to get into this field. What would your advice be? Luca, I'll stick with you.
Reach out, be confident. You got like social media like LinkedIn, anything like that, where you can find people. If there's someone you want to talk to, maybe your line manager or someone above them knows of a contact or way of getting in contact with them. So just be confident and do it. I've done it before, needed to, just to get some advice on some things. So yeah, definitely worth it.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that as well. It's great to see that it's worked firsthand for you. Sarah, from your experience, what would you suggest to somebody who wants to network?
Be brave. I think you're right. I think be brave, reach out. I think, like you say, most people within a warehouse environment have been where you are, and will welcome sharing their experiences. They're very proud of where they've been and what they've achieved. And I think if it's around getting into a warehouse environment and you don't know, often, just by reaching out to the organisation and asking if you can come and have a look round, or, come to one of the open days, or talk it through with one of the interviewers, and we can, obviously share our kind of view of the role and the warehouse itself. So, but yeah, be brave, get on LinkedIn, get on the social media. Most of the businesses, we've got a real great presence on social media at the moment, and, respond to that and reach out.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely brilliant. Olivia, you're nodding along. You've always got something to add.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think it's good to know that nobody's going to judge you for trying. I think if you put yourself out there, they're only going to like you more. You're only going to become a more likeable character if you're putting yourself out there, recommending yourself. Get your name out there. Absolutely.
I love that. It's just everyone's going to like you for putting yourself out there. And I think that's absolutely fabulous advice. Thank you, all three of you. And if you want to find out more about open days or reaching out for career advice, make sure that you are checking out generationlogistics.org. Luca, I'm going to start with you. Could you share how you moved up the career ladder and what was your starting position to where you are now?
So the starting position was just applying for apprenticeships. That's what I wanted to do because I wanted to be involved with business somehow. Wasn't really bothered what area of business, just wanted to do it. So I applied via like Indeed, government website, lots of different websites applying. But yeah, that's how I got the apprenticeship. And then from there, I was on the apprenticeship program. Well, I still am, but I've been on it for just over a year. And then I got offered the first line manager role.
Fabulous.
They wanted to give me the opportunity to develop. I wanted to, so it all just came together quite nicely.
That's brilliant.
Put myself out there, just tried to show what I could do, that sort of thing. So yeah, it all came together quite nicely.
Yeah, so it's quite a nice career ladder there, and congratulations on the position. That's brilliant. Olivia, can I ask you the same thing?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, I don't think anyone looks at a warehouse job and goes, absolutely, I want to become a picker in a warehouse. So I originally was applying for university, decided it wasn't for me. So was actually just looking for a full-time job to earn a bit of money, develop some skills before I move on. I have now stayed in the current role that I am in for touching a year now, and I'm constantly developing. So in terms of evolving, I started out at entry level as a picker. I've then developed my second skill, so I was trained in doing replens. I now run replens, so I oversee the colleagues that do that. I have a fantastic team that work and do that. And there's so many things I want to go into and develop my skills, and I want to be a part of the automation, so get some transferable skills in that and hopefully see where that goes.
Yeah, well, the possibilities are endless there by the looks of things. You mentioned about not going down the university route, which is really very interesting. And of course, if you are looking at other ways outside of uni, you can always check out opportunities at Not Going to Uni and generationlogistics.org. Sarah, I'm going to come across to you with that same question about building. Where did you start and what was your career ladder like?
I suppose mine's been a little bit different because I've followed the recruitment talent acquisition pathway. How I would say my career's progressed since joining a warehousing logistics environment, I would say it's very much about getting your elbows out. And I'm quite well known for my statement about getting my elbows out and making myself quite sticky in environments. So if there's a project that perhaps I can be helping with, if there's somebody that I can speak to, if there's an event that I can support, then but basically having that visibility and putting yourself out there will mean that you get the opportunity to be involved in projects, which will then accelerate your career further.
I love that. And we're going to coin that, getting your elbows out. Can you just explain to anybody at home what you mean by that?
Well, I suppose I get myself into places so I can make myself appear in a warehouse and be heard and perhaps get myself involved in things. I will always ask and say, could I come and see a shift briefing? Could I come and look at what's going on, in a certain warehouse? It does help that I think once you get into warehousing, it does become a little bit obsessive. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I love a warehouse now, and I can grade them 1 to 10, as we're driving through down the M1, if we can see a fantastic warehouse, it's quite exciting. And I think, it is quite an industry that you do get hooked into. Yeah.
So what would make a grade 1 warehouse for you?
I think possibly where we are today. I think it's, a brand new warehouse. I think it's 950,000 square feet with obviously some fantastic office space attached. But yeah, downstairs, a brand new work environment for people. A great, clean looking, very big warehouse, I think.
Fantastic. Well, I'm absolutely inspired. Thank you ever so much to the three of you for bringing so much knowledge to the sofa and joining us today. That was brilliant. Thank you for watching. This is season 3 of Generation Logistics. We have just busted the myth that warehousing is a dead-end job. Now, I've been your host, Ed, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.